The doorway you've been avoiding. There's a conversation nobody wants to have about fear. We treat it like the villain, the thing to conquer, to overcome, to bury so deep it stops whispering our name at 3 in the morning. But what if I told you that fear isn't the enemy? What if fear is actually the most honest teacher you'll ever meet? I recently sat down with Gilbert Adriane, a man whose life reads like a testament to divine resilience. Gilbert has walked through the kind of darkness most people only whisper about: depression that swallowed years, addiction that stole his sense of self, family chaos that made him question whether he'd ever find solid ground. And yet, here he is, doing the sacred work of helping people step into their new year with courage, reminding us all that faith in Jesus sustains us even when we've abandoned ourselves. Gilbert's message is deceptively simple, but seismically powerful. Facing your fears is how you grow. It's how you succeed. It's how you reclaim the self worth that life tried to steal from you. And honestly, after hearing his heart, I realized his story isn't just his story, it's ours. Because here's what nobody tells you about being a high achieving Black woman: they hand you the cape early, real early. You learn to carry everyone, to hold it together, to be the strong one, the reliable one, the one who never cracks. And somewhere along the way, you start believing that strength means never falling apart, that rest is laziness, that softness is weakness, that if you stop doing, you stop mattering. But Gilbert reminded me, and I want to remind you today, that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about having the audacity to face what terrifies you, to name it out loud, and to walk through it anyway, knowing you're not alone. It's about recognizing that the cape you've been wearing, it's heavy, and it was never yours to carry in the first place. So let's talk about fear. Not the kind in horror movies. I'm talking about the kind that wakes you up at 3 in the morning. The kind that whispers, you're not enough, you're too much, you're too late, you're too broken. The kind that keeps you hustling, performing, wearing that superwoman cape until your shoulders ache and your soul is gasping for air. The kind that makes you say yes when your body is screaming no. The kind that convinces you that rest is something you have to earn, not something you deserve simply because you're human. Because here's what I've learned, and what Gilbert's story confirms in the most powerful way: fear doesn't go away when you ignore it, it doesn't shrink when you pretend it's not there. It grows. It becomes the boss of your life, the script you didn't write but keep performing night after night. And the only way out, you gotta face it head on, eyes open, heart ready. Gilbert shared 3 truths with me that I want every single person listening to remember. First, facing your fears builds unbreakable self worth. Even after you've lost it through trials like addiction, family chaos, and the kind of darkness that makes you question if you'll ever see light again. Second, God's strength, that divine, unshakable force, turns depression into growth and success. It transforms your pain into purpose. And third, faith in Jesus sustains you. He never leaves, not when you're at rock bottom, not when you're climbing out, not when you're standing at the edge wondering if you'll make it. Not ever. Now, I know some of you are thinking, okay, that's beautiful. But how does that actually work in real life? How do you face fears that feel bigger than you? How do you walk through darkness when you can't see the other side? So let me share 3 stories of Black leaders who faced fears so massive they could have been swallowed whole. And instead, they turned those fears into empires, movements, and legacies that changed the world. Let's start with Reginald Lewis. If you don't know his name, you should. This man grew up in segregated Baltimore, surrounded by poverty and racism, the kind that tells you from birth that you don't belong in rooms of power. But Reginald didn't just knock on those doors, he kicked them down. He went to Harvard Law, then bet everything on leveraged buyouts that terrified even seasoned Wall Street players. We're talking about deals so risky that people thought he'd lost his mind. In 1987, He acquired the largest European food company ever owned by a black led firm, rebranding it TLC Beatrice International. This was a jaw dropping $985 million deal. He became America's first black billionaire, building a $3.5 billion empire. But here's what gets me, it wasn't just about the money, it was about the fear he faced every single day, the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, the fear that maybe the world was right, that he didn't belong, that he should have stayed small and quiet and safe. And he faced it anyway. He pushed through the doubt with heart driven resolve, with faith in his vision, with a refusal to let fear write his ending. Reginald Lewis didn't just succeed, he paved the way for every black entrepreneur who came after him, proving that facing your fears isn't just personal, it's generational, it's revolutionary. Then there's Michael Brady, former CCO of Greyston Bakery. Michael pioneered something that the industry thought was absolutely insane. He called it open hiring, no background checks, no resumes, no barriers. If you walked in, you got a job. Now imagine the fear in that decision. The industry told him he was crazy. The risks were massive. What if it failed? What if people took advantage? What if he lost everything? What if his compassion was mistaken for foolishness? But Michael faced those fears with compassion driven risk, rooted in a belief in people's potential, much like the divine strength that carries us through our own personal demons. He transformed Grayston into a social enterprise powerhouse, creating fair jobs for thousands and revolutionizing hiring equity in the food industry. He didn't just build a business, he built a movement that empowered Black and underserved communities with opportunities they'd been denied everywhere else. Michael's story reminds us that facing fears isn't just about personal success, it's about lifting others as you climb. It's about creating pathways where there were only walls. And finally, let me tell you about Phil Kohler. Phil bought Roman Enterprises, a tiny automotive paint business, after facing personal setbacks that would have made most people quit and never look back. Pregnancy delays, solo operations, customer and supplier concentration risks, the kind of fears that whisper, you're going to lose everything. You're in over your head. You should have played it safe. But Phil confronted those fears head on with bold faith in a turnaround, securing SBA loans and seller notes, betting on himself when no one else would. He transformed an $800,000 business with one employee into a thriving cash flow machine. His story, inspired by the grit of figures like Reginald Lewis, proves that fear facing leads to prosperity. It models accessible business growth for Black entrepreneurs, emphasizing that resilience isn't about never being afraid. It's about moving forward anyway. It's about saying, I see the fear, I acknowledge it, and I'm walking through it with faith as my foundation. These three stories, Reginald, Michael, and Phil, they're not just success stories, they're fear stories. They're about people who looked at the thing that terrified them most and said, I'm going through this, not around it. And that's exactly what Gilbert Adriane has been teaching people to do. That's the work he's committed his life to, helping people understand that fear is the doorway, not the dead end. Because here's the truth we don't talk about enough: fear isn't the enemy, fear is the threshold. It's the doorway between the life you've been living and the life you're meant to live. And on the other side of that doorway, that's where your soft girl era begins. Now, I know what you're thinking. LeAnne, I thought soft girl era was about rest and boundaries and saying no without guilt. And yes, to absolutely. But here's the plot twist: you can't rest until you stop running. You can't set boundaries until you face the fear of disappointing people. You can't say no without guilt until you confront the fear that your worth is tied to your productivity, your usefulness, your ability to carry everyone else's burdens. Softness isn't passive. Softness is the bravest thing you'll ever do. It's the choice to stop performing strength and start embodying peace. It's the decision to release the cape, to redefine what strength even means, to embrace healing in real time, and to protect your peace as a practice, not a luxury you only get to experience on vacation once a year if you're lucky. And that requires facing fears, big ones. The fear that if you stop doing, you'll stop mattering. The fear that rest is laziness. The fear that softness makes you weak. The fear that if you're not carrying everyone, you're failing. The fear that saying no makes you selfish. The fear that prioritizing yourself means you don't love your family, your community, your calling. But Gilbert's message, and the message woven through every story I've shared today, is this: God's strength turns depression into growth. Faith sustains you, and facing your fears builds unbreakable self worth. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not a one time decision, it's a daily practice of choosing courage over comfort, truth over performance, and faith over fear. So here's what I'm challenging you to do: I want you to identify one fear this new year, just one. Maybe it's the fear of setting a boundary with family. Maybe it's the fear of starting that business you've been dreaming about for years. Maybe it's the fear of admitting you're not okay, that you need help, that you can't do it all. Maybe it's the fear of resting without explanation, without earning it, without justifying it to anyone. Name it. Write it down. Pray over it. Sit with it. And then, with God's strength, with faith that Jesus never leaves you, I want you to face it. Not all at once, not perfectly, but intentionally. One step, one conversation, one decision, one boundary, one no, one moment of choosing yourself without apology. Because here's what happens when you face your fears: you don't just survive them, you transform them. You turn survival into something sacred. You turn pain into purpose. You turn fear into freedom. You turn the cape into a cushion. You turn the hustle into healing. You turn the performance into peace. And that's when your soft girl era truly begins. Not when life gets easier, but when you get braver, when you choose softness as an act of rebellion, when you protect your peace like it's the most valuable thing you own, because it is, when you say no without guilt, rest without explanation, and heal without apology, when you stop waiting for permission and start giving it to yourself. Gilbert Adriane he was out here changing lives by teaching people to face their fears with faith. Reginald Lewis faced Wall Street and won. Michael Brady faced industry bias and revolutionized hiring. Phil Kohler faced personal setbacks and built an empire. And you're next. This is your moment. This is your doorway. And I'm here to tell you that you don't have to walk through it alone. I want you to leave here today feeling empowered, hopeful, compassionate towards yourself, yet strong in your resolve. I want you to feel ready to conquer the fears that have been holding you hostage, knowing that Jesus never leaves, that God's strength is real, and that your self worth isn't something you earn, it's something you reclaim. This is your soft girl era. This is your season of facing fears, releasing capes, and stepping into the softness, rest, and radical joy you deserve. Not because life handed it to you, but because you had the courage to face what scared you most and walk through it anyway. So here's my final question for you: what's the one fear you're going to face this year? What's the one boundary you're going to set? What's the one thing you're going to stop doing so you can finally start living? Because the world doesn't need another version of you running on empty. The world needs you whole, rested, soft, free, fearless, faithful. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting until you've earned it. The doorway is right in front of you. And fear is just the teacher reminding you that what's on the other side is worth it. Now walk through it with faith, with courage, with The unshakable belief that you were made for more than survival. You were made for softness, for joy, for peace, for freedom. Welcome to your soft girl era. Now go claim it.